G'day, Bruce here, Barking Dog Bim. Why own a dog and bark yourself? I give you tips and tricks on how to leverage Archicad to get the most out of it, how to get it to do the job for you. Today, we're going to look at label accuracy and how to ensure that the content of your label properly reflects the object it's attached to, and how when you change that object, the label will automatically update to suit. Shout out to Michael Wilson for this one. He's a smart man. I'll start off with the solution for those of you with busy days and want to know what to do up front. I'll do that and then I'll unpack it later and how you can implement Graphisoft parts to do this as well. For those of you in a hurry, this is what you do. You name your project parts in a set way, standard format. I like to name them with the project number up front, then a space, then the code of what it is you want to appear in the label, another space, and then a description. Make sure that the delimiter you use between the project number and the description are the same, so don't use an underscore at the front and then a space at the back. Make sure if you've used a space at the front, use a space at the back. And in this project, I've used that format for all of my project parts. Project number, code, description. Project number, code, description. All right. So we've got a DL101 floor lamp here. Then we go to our properties manager, create a new code. We'll call it code. It's a string expression, and we want to split. For the text, we want to split the library part name. The delimiter will be a space. If you've used, say, an underscore, this is where you put an underscore, but we'll use a space because that's how I've named my parts. And the part index we want is the second part. So this will go through, split up that library part name. When it finds a space, it will split that name up, and we want the second part of that index. We then need to make this property available for whatever relevant classifications there are. In this case, it's furniture we're after. Be very specific at this time. Don't choose all because that will overly bloat your file. You want to be very targeted with the classifications you list. Now, because this lamp already has a classification of furniture, now when I come in here, the code will show up. And if I check that expression, it's filled out correctly. Now I attach a label. This is just a text label. And I make sure that it is pointing auto text to that code. And that's it. Now when I change this part to something else, that label will automatically update to suit whatever part I've selected. No further effort required. That's the quick version. Now I'll unpack that a bit and dig into the whys and wherefores. Labeling or tagging objects in a project is one of those fundamental tasks that we do. The representation on a drawing is made up of two things: its graphical appearance and its label, or its code, tag, whatever you want to call it. Both need to match, otherwise in all likelihood the wrong thing will get ordered or built and you'll get the blame. Even if the code doesn't match the graphical representation, the contractor probably won't ask any questions. They'll just go ahead and order the part based on the code. Getting these tags to be 100% accurate is critical to what we do. This is a DL101 object. That's the code that's been called up for it in the schedule of our fixtures and fittings. And in this case, it is a floor lamp. DL101 floor lamp. Ideally, this is what we want: a correctly placed label that has the correct code, DL-101. That's what we're after. But I'm sure you've seen scenarios like this. So this is still DL-101, except there's been a mix of uppercase and lowercase. So even though that's an L, it looks like an I. Then we've got this, the hyphen's missing. And if we change the font, we can also see that it's actually a DL101, not a 101. So incorrect code there. Then you get this scenario where you've got an object without any label at all for a variety of reasons. Maybe the user didn't even know what it was or where to find the code. Then you get this, code without an object, an orphaned label. Or this, the wrong code completely. So this method counters all of that and makes sure that you've got the correct code for the correct object. Now there are a number of ways that you can label an object. The absolute worst way is with dumb text. Got my object, got a text box. So if I move the object or delete the object, nothing happens to the text box. That text box has to be filled out manually. So I have to find that code somewhere, make sure I've got the right object, fill it out manually for every object that gets placed or changed. And in this case, you can see it's the wrong code. It should be a DL101. The next worst way, which is, let's call it improved, is an attached label. This is a label attached to this object, and you can see because when I hover over the label, it highlights the object it's attached to. Benefits of this is when I move the object, the label moves with it. If the object gets deleted, the label goes with it. But the other problems associated with manually entering the text are still there. I still have to enter that label, enter the correct code, which I need to find in a separate list somewhere. Make sure that I actually enter that code correctly. So it's not much of an improvement, it's a slight improvement. Then we've got the worst of the best. So we have, in this instance, an attached label reading from a manual property. This is a label attached to the object. You can see when I hover, we get the benefits of an attached label. So if the object moves or is deleted, the label is affected as well. And it's reading a property from the object itself. It's not manually entered text in the label. It's reading data that's part of the object. In this case, it's the element ID, but I could also have a string property that I could enter that information into. And if I change that element ID, the label updates to suit. That's good in that any view that this object is labeled in, that data will be consistent across all those different views. The downside, of course, is that I still need to manually enter that information. And that would be subject to all of those errors I showed you before. Inconsistent formatting, uppercase, lowercase mix, letters and numbers improperly mixed. And I would still need to find that code somewhere in a schedule that can be, 50, 100 pages long and have that as a reference separate to what I'm doing. Even know where to find it. Next is what I call the best of the compromised method. So it's an attached label. Again, all those benefits, moving, deleting, reading information from the object itself. In this instance, what we do is we create a list property. Property name, just give it a name that makes sense to you, and it will be an option set, in which you enter all of the codes that you will be using for your project. Again, make it available to the correct classification. In my case, just furniture. And make sure that this is selected from the list. With my text label, then fill that auto text with that property I've just created. There we go. That's an improvement on the previous method I showed in that it's not manually entered text. It's selected from a list, therefore reducing the errors that you could encounter. However, the user still needs to know what that code is. They still need to select it correctly from a list. That's double handling. One, placement of the correct object, graphical representation. Two, you then select the code from a list. Double handling, room for error, increased time. And when you're talking about large projects with hundreds, maybe thousands of objects, this is a not insubstantial time overhead. And the list itself will need to be created and maintained. And again, this could be hundreds of objects. The absolute best method is with an automatic label that reads its content directly from the library part name. So you create a specific part for every coded element in your project. As I pointed out earlier, this is my FF&E for this project, where every individually selected and coded element has its own project part. In your properties manager, you create the expression that splits that library part name, make it available to the classifications that are going to need it. It doesn't have to just be FF&E. It can be any coded. And when I say coded, I mean there's a code selected for it in a schedule in your project, in the specification. Point your auto text label. Again, no special scripting needed. This is just a bog standard text label pointing to the property. Now, when I change my object to anything else, that label, that code updates to suit. So no chance of getting an incorrect label. And if you want to make sure that the label's actually attached to the correct object, you just hover over the label and it highlights your object. Using this method, you can do very comprehensive and complicated floor plans, having the confidence that every single FF&E item in this plan is correctly labeled. You place down the FF&E items, then you select them all and attach a label. To label your objects, first of all, make sure you have your default label settings set the way you want them. Easiest way, of course, is to eyedrop the label with the settings you want. Select all of the objects, so you can do a find and select for all of the FF&E, for example, on a particular floor. And then you come up to Document, Annotation, Label Selected Elements. I've put this in my work environment as a button, and then it just plonks that label into the origin or the center of your object, attached correctly. So in this one, lots of different FF&E, lots of different subtle differences in the codes. So J0901A as opposed to J0901B. Very easy to mess up those codes, and I encountered plenty of those in the source documents. Whereas using this method, bit of setup time up front, of course, but the time saved and the accuracy gained is just without comparison. It is definitely well worth it. Okay, so we've covered all that. How do you now create your own project parts? Well, there's the fully scripted method, which is essentially what I just showed you. Now, these can take a variety of forms. You can have a all singing, all dancing GDL part, or you can have it quite pared down. These objects that I use for this project, they're very simplified versions. I only scripted 3D where I needed them to show in 3D when they're against the wall in elevation. Otherwise, it's just a 2D representation. For example, carpet, that's just a rectangle of varying sizes. This has a 3D representation, but it's just a very simple prism. These tables, they have no 3D representation. They're just circles of varying sizes. The set of drawers, really no detail in it at all. So that's fit for purpose for what they needed to do for this project, an appropriate level of detail. Another project that I worked on needed sunshades over the windows. So you can see them in side view here, and they're in front view here. And the same philosophy or methodology was used there, as simple as they needed to be in order to properly convey what they were. Nice and simple for the user to use. And these are all sunshade devices 01. But we have like a sunshade device 03. Where's the SDO2? SDO3 is an SDO2. Again, using the same methodology where the object place creates the code. However, that's not always feasible. You don't always have the time, and why would you want to create specific scripted objects for stuff that Graphisoft already does? So there is a way that you can utilize the Graphisoft objects to do this same process, but out of the box parts. Let me show you. So let's say we're just wanting to use this bed object. It does what we need it to do, but we want it to generate this automatic code. We'll place one in the floor plan, open it using File, Libraries and Objects, Open Object. I can use the shortcut key or on my Edit GDL Library Parts toolbar, which is this toolbar here. I can use that button there to open it. Once it's open, I will go File, Save As, save it to my project library, and I'll use the same naming convention that I did before. So project number, the code I want to use, and a description. Make sure that this checkbox is on, create new library part. I'll save it. Now I can place that object. I'll get rid of this Graphisoft one. And if I attach my label to it, it's using that same functionality. It's got the classification of furniture. So it's creating its own code here. And what we do is we open this object up, this one we've just created, because we don't want to create a full copy of this. We want to refer to the Graphisoft part. What we do is we come into this object, this one that we've just created, and we go through and we delete all of the scripts. Then in the master script, we call that original object using that statement there. Call bed1 parameters all, or whatever Graphisoft part you've used. Save that. Now we've got a fully functioning Graphisoft part that is named the way we want it to be named. So in our description here, we can set our default values the way we want them to be. I'll just change a couple. And when I save that, that means that when new objects are placed, they will inherit the default values of that object. So that's kind of step one, setting the default values. But what you want to do is you want to hard code the relevant settings in this part. So one, the user can just click and place. Two, any existing parts will inherit the values that you set at a global level. And three, the user can't place an object and then change its size or its settings to then be outside of the scope of what the part is meant to do as called up on your schedule. So in this case, it would be a proprietary product, a bed. It would come in a certain size, be a certain type. So I want to make sure that all those settings are set. Now this is important that you set your values first. Make sure the bed type is, say, we'll make it type 2. And then you set your parameters to match those values you've just set. It's important that you set your values first up here. You can't just go parameters a equals 1.1. It doesn't work. You need to set the values first, then set the parameters, and then call your macro. So let's save that. You saw that grow automatically. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to run the parameter script. I didn't have to do any resets or anything like that. And now I cannot change this object. So let's just say you've got bed 1, and for whatever reason the client changes the selection and it becomes a 900 wide bed. Before I save that, I'll open this in 3D so we can see any changes. And the bed head type, which will be that parameter there, will be type 2. And the headboard material will be, let's make it a paint, 264. So I've added some settings here. I come down to the parameters after I've added those, add them in here. Now when I come to my 3D, changes size, headboard changes type, changes material. I didn't run any parameter script. It just does it straight when you reload the library. Now that I've got this in place and I'm happy with how it's working, here we go, the size updates when I go to my floor plan. Let's copy this object across. And in this object here, we will go File, Save As, and we'll save it as another type. Let's call it bed 5, just for kicks and giggles. Save that, come in here, change the part to a bed 5. And there we go, the part's updated. But this is, of course, going to be a different size, be a different type. Right, so it's changed automatically. All the settings are as I've stipulated in the master script. Now, the user can't change stuff because it's been set, but they can only not change the stuff that you specifically outlined in the master script. So, for example, I can change this because I haven't specifically defined it in the master script. Now, I don't want all that, but I don't want to go through every single parameter and define all of the values for every single parameter either. The idea of this is to make it quick and accessible so you can rapidly create your project parts with minimal effort. So to prevent users changing stuff that you don't want to get changed in your parameter script, you go lock all. That's it. So now when I come back to my parameters, they are all locked. I've only done this in bed 5. I'll need to do this in bed 1 as well. But this is just to demonstrate the point. Take your time up front to get all the script in place. There we go. All of these parameters are now locked. Can't change them. Now, if you have the scenario where you want to set certain values, for example, the size and type, you want to lock just about everything, but you want the user to have control over something. Let's say we'll give them control over the fill type and the background pen. So we find out what those parameters are. 2D representation, we'll go GS fill type. So in the parameter script, after the all, we list any parameters we want to be excluded from this lock command. Fill type, just as an example. Now when I come back here, there we go. Those are now accessible to the user. I can set them here. For example. But this is great because you can also set your pens to company standards to make sure that your objects are displaying consistently and using the correct pen across all of your documentation sets. And it's a great way of locking down these parts, but also using the existing Graphisoft parts to speed up process but ensure that the object displays as it's supposed to, and get this automatic labeling in place. If I change this to a bed 1, updated to bed 1. There you go. It's a very handy little tip there. Remembering, of course, that these are just text labels, nothing special about the label. You can have frames in the labels. Just give them a little bit of a punch. You can also use, if you don't want to script your own label, but you still want to utilize this but have a frame, you can also use the Graphisoft properties label, which gives you a little bit more options over how this label displays. Can be a bit clunky, but that's that other option there. There we go. And you can adjust this stem as well. Right. So you got those options there as well. While I'm here, I'll show you the 3 ways you can attach a label to an object. First way is to make sure that this is set to associative as opposed to independent. So make sure it's on associative. Then when I click on an object, it will be attached to that object. Method number 2 is to have your object or objects selected. Come up to Document, Annotation, Label Selected Elements, and it will attach a label like that. If you've got a label attached to something or nothing, and you want to attach it to something else, so I'll just change this to the second one and go bed 5, and I want to attach this label to this one, have the label selected, make sure your selection tool is active, and then control click on the object, and it will reattach. There you go, 3 different ways you can do that. There we go, all done. This is a brilliant method for ensuring accuracy, speed, and completeness of documentation. If you like this, leave a thumbs up. Also consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. And if you would like some coaching, consulting, or custom coded content, then consider getting in touch. I'll see you next time.